United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We have one order of business to do tonight, and that is to swear Charles Howley in as a manager for another term. So, Charlie, if you would come up, we will do this together, I guess. So, I, Charles Howley.
I, Charles Howley.
Do solemnly swear.
Do solemnly swear.
That I will support the Constitution of the United States.
That I will support the Constitution of the United States.
And of the state of Minnesota.
And of the state of Minnesota.
And will faithfully discharge the duties.
And will faithfully discharge the duties.
Of the office of manager.
Of the office of manager.
Of the Prior Lake Spring Lake Watershed District.
Of the Prior Lake Spring Lake Watershed District.
To the best of my judgment and ability.
To the best of my judgment and ability.
Great. Congratulations.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. All right, now we're all official again. We will start the meeting with public comment. If anyone wishes to address the Board of Managers on an item not on the agenda or on the consent agenda, please come forward at this time. Turn on the microphone and state your name and address. The chair may limit your time for commenting. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to address any item on the agenda tonight? Is there anyone in the audience that would like to address any of the items on the agenda? Hearing none, we will close the public comment period and move on to the approval of the agenda. I would entertain a motion from the board for approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Moved by Manager Hennis.
Second.
Seconded by Mary Ann. Any other comments, additions?
Yes, I have a comment. Does number item 4.3 should have a vote behind it? I know that's rather minor, but.
Okay, so would you like to make that amendment? I think 4.3 and 4.4 are both action
also?
items. Yep. So motion and second, comfortable with the amendments?
I second.
Yep, so you're comfortable with?
Yes.
Okay. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 5-0. Moving on to the other old and new business manager presentations. Is there any discussion of managers or any information the managers would like to bring to the board?
Mr. President, I got one quick thing. I attended the City Council meeting last night, and they had a quite thorough discussion of the intersection of Highway 13 and Duluth Avenue. And they came with several ideas on how to expedite traffic by widening the intersection, perhaps routing the traffic down to Village Lake Drive, and then into the driveways to Wells Fargo, Village Market, and the Laundry, and thereby closing off the left-hand turn coming into Duluth, which used to go right into the Wells Fargo and the shopping center. They're still looking at the feasibility, but it was strongly supported by the City Council so far where it's at right now. Thank you.
Okay, we'll start off with the level of Prior Lake. It is now at 902.4, which means that it is not flowing out of Prior Lake. There is no flow leaving Prior Lake. I was asked to give a quick update on the status of the lake water quality so far this year. The data that I have is just from May and June. So I'm a little hesitant about talking about the water quality so far because it's not really the way that we analyze data. It's more on an annual average for the whole year, which is analyzed by the PCA as June through September, but this will just give you a snapshot on how we're doing so far. And this graph shows how the lakes compare to each other. So I have it graphed from lowest to highest. So Lower Prior Lake, this is total phosphorus, and the red dotted lines are the state water quality standards. So you want to be below those lines if you were analyzing the data from June through September. So you can see Lower Prior is the best, then Upper Prior, then Spring, Fish Lake, the West Bay of Pike Lake, and then the East Bay of Pike Lake has the most phosphorus so far this year.
So Jamie, you mentioned that we usually wait later to look at these numbers, but are these relative numbers that you can relate to? I mean, do these look different than last year or the year before, or your experience?
So
I know it tends to go higher as the season goes on.
what I did was this next graph compares to the past years from 2006 to 2017, the average of May and June data from those years, so you can kind of see how it compares to May and June from the last 11 or 12 years here. So the green line is Upper Prior Lake, and the black line is Spring Lake. Again, we're looking at phosphorus, and that red dashed line is the water quality standard, which we want to, again, stay below. So just comparing it to last year, we are looking a little bit better so far this year compared to last year.
Mr. President, I have a question.
Manager Hannes.
Jamie, so you won't feel comfortable with any grand conclusions until what, September or October?
Yeah, so the end of September, the June through September is the data that we look at. So after September,
Okay.
October would be the earliest we'd be able to analyze the data. So I do plan on summarizing the data either in October or November. If we have the data available in October, I can give
Yeah,
a
if
better
it'd
summary.
be possible, October as soon as you can, the sooner the better. Thank you.
Yep.
Manager Spitzmuller.
Thank you, President Corrigan. Jamie, just to be clear, though, this data point for each of these years is the May-June average. We're talking apples here?
Yep. Thank you. The next graph is kind of what I was getting at. So the dashed line is the previous year's June through September data, just so you can kind of compare. So it's the same lines, and the black and green solid lines are the same as what we were looking at. And then the dashed lines are the June through September averages from the previous year. So it just shows you that it will go up or down from here. Sometimes it does go down. Probably the majority of the time it'll go up. Average will go up from now. So. But in general, a rough, quick glance at it, it kind of follows along so it looks to me that maybe it'll be lower this year than last year. Any other questions on that data so far? Okay. Another thing that we had done this last month was in the outlet pipe, we had the manhole benches smoothed. So we did this last fall, and there was one that was forgotten, I guess. So this is just I have kind of a before and after video of why we wanted to smooth these manholes. So the flow coming out of the outlet structure goes through that quarter mile, almost half mile long underground pipe. And there's about 5 manholes along the way, and they were getting turbulent at those manholes because the benches weren't smooth. And I didn't really know what that meant until I took on this project. So I have this video for anybody that doesn't understand what we were doing, and I hope it works. Of course not. Let me see here. Yeah. Here, you'll be able to see the turbulence. There you go, with right at it hits the manhole down here, and then it creates the turbulence. So we weren't getting as much flow through the outlet pipe as we were hoping for, so we smoothed all those manholes to create a straighter velocity and get more flow through the pipe. So this picture on the left is what it looks like after. So if you can imagine the video, the water was swirling right in this area, so they poured in concrete here so that there's a nice smooth line of flow that would go through these manholes now. The top right is, as they were constructing it, they built that little form, and here's the crew mixing the cement for the manhole. So that was completed last week, and so we did have to close the main gate for a few days at the outlet structure, but there was hardly any flow coming through anyway, so it didn't affect the level of the lake.
If anybody been driving in the Fish Point Park neighborhood lately, you might have noticed that they started construction over at Fairlawn Shores. They had a pretty small area to work with, and they're digging quite a large hole, so it's kind of interesting to see. They just started finishing up the retaining wall today, and it's just, it's really interesting. But they should, Kevin Casey's the contractor on that, and he anticipates that he'll be done by the end of the week, which is great. So it's a quick in and out, and once the vegetation's established, we'll open that up and have the water flow in there. But it's looking really good out there. And I should say, too, that this is part of our Lower Prior Lake Protection Grant, which is funded partially by the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency.
Do you want to explain why we have this project?
Sure. Diana's requested that I explain a little more about this project. This project originally was just to have a biofiltration basin that would help remove some of the phosphorus before it reaches Lower Prior Lake. Our goal with this grant project is to keep the water clean that's going into the lake. This is a different watershed than the Fish Point Park and Indian Ridge watershed, so this is the only treatment that it'll get before going into the lake. Yeah, I think that kind of wraps it up. And then I just wanted to just do a little brief summary on the farmer-led council meeting. Manager Hennis was out there last month at this great meeting with the farmer-led council members. We talked about a bunch of things, but I wanted to make a few highlights. So we're still pushing that lake-friendly farm program, which is encouraging farmers to do these whole farm assessments. It's kind of like the Ag Certainty program, but maybe like an Ag Certainty light. It focuses more on phosphorus removal from our system, which is our main goal. And it really just helps us get a foot in the door, talking to these farmers about different practices that they could do, and then also promoting all the great things that some of these farmers are already doing out there. Another thing we talked about is the cover crop cost share program. So last year we did the reverse auction, and this year what they want to do, we realized that we weren't really attacking like the high priority areas, and there might be a better way to do it. So we discussed all sorts of different things. We talked about doing the reverse auction again this coming year. We talked about, just pumping up that cost share assessment. But what we really need farmers to do is to try it, because Paul Kruger, Rob Casey, and others have had success at it, and we want people to, know firsthand that this is going to work on their farms. So what the SWCD is going to do is they're going to assess the high priority areas that would be most beneficial to have these cover crops, and we're just going to knock on farmers' doors and say, hey, can we just put a cover crop in? Because if we pay for those costs directly with, no hassle to the farmer, he doesn't have to think about it. He just says yes, signs up, and we do like an aerial seeding for it. It'll be really easy. He'll be able to see that it works, and then maybe be encouraged the following year to sign up for a cover crop program on his own. So that's the idea behind that. We're still kind of fleshing out the details. And we also talked about the existing cost share incentives, the water quality inlets, alum-treated biologs, and they all agree that those are really working. People are putting those in. There's minor feedback we got from those, but we're going to keep continuing with those incentives. Another thing we talked about is having a fall farmer-led council tour. They want to highlight some of the projects that they've done, and so it would be going out to their farms. Like, it would likely be a last-minute tour because it's very weather dependent and farmer work dependent, and so it would be like a last-minute tour, kind of like we did with the cart management, very quickly organized. But they'd like to highlight some of those this fall. And then our next meeting is going to be on November 11th.
So I think we have one question.
Oh, sure.
Manager Spitzmuller.
Maggie, could you back up the one slide? So the bioretention pond is collecting runoff from, is that 150th we're looking at, kind of straight on? So this area is designed to collect runoff from the roadway primarily? Is that the intent, or otherwise?
Manager Spitzmuller. Yeah, that's correct. So this is right at Fairlawn Shores and 150th Street. So it's right at that little corner there. And yeah, so it's catching all that stormwater coming off those areas. And we did expand this project because they were having flooding at that one corner. So it kind of almost doubled the size of the storage we're going to collect. And it ended up being quite a much larger project, but it should benefit both the neighbors and us for water quality.
All right, and then I have an update on the Raymond Park project for you. So as you guys probably know, we're doing a restoration project at Raymond Park on the south side of Spring Lake. The Great River Greening is doing the restoration work for us, and they've made a lot of progress this last month. So the site prep work is currently in progress. The buckthorn removal is almost complete. They've got another couple days of work left out there. And then in the beach restoration area, right where it's by where the grass used to be, and then the area that used to be turf grass, they've killed off pretty much all the vegetation there in preparation for what we're going to be seeding it with this fall. And they did kind of a light till in the grass area because it was really compacted. But if all the rest of the site prep work goes according to plan, they should be able to seed around mid-September or so and do any plantings that we end up doing, you know, extra plugs or that kind of thing. But as of now, we're well on our way to finishing up this project by the end of the year, so we're sitting pretty well.
So this slide probably looks familiar, but we're still in the process of having our operations and maintenance manual for the Prior Lake Outlet structure reviewed by the Department of Natural Resources. We are also in the process of revising the memorandum of agreement with the cooperators, also known as the MOA-JPA. At the last cooperators meeting, there was agreement by the cooperators that the Technical Advisory Committee will do kind of a review of different options that are available to enhance or replace the MOA in 2018. So they'll just kind of do a white paper, I would assume, on those. And then in 2019, it would be up to the cooperators to determine which of those options they'd like to proceed with. And then the last one, staff and city are working on a dam procedure. As you know, we had high water over Memorial Day weekend. We're kind of building up to that. Because we were able to not have to put any of the procedures in place, we put this on the back burner, but we are going to be revisiting it. And it is a procedure that will be supported by the Department of Natural Resources, so we won't have to go through all the hoops the next time. So in 2012-2013, previous Board of Managers considered rule revisions, Prior Lake, Spring Lake Watershed District rule revisions. They were put on hold, and starting on Monday, we're actually bringing them back forward. So Carl Almir from EOR is going to be putting together a document that updates everybody on where we were at when we left it. There are some people who are planning on attending the meeting on Monday today that have participated in the process earlier. There are some new people. So we want to make sure everybody starts at the same place. Our hope is that we will have the rules pretty much completed by the end of the year. We are going to have a public involvement process for approval of those rules. And those rules will then be, once they're adopted by the board, they will be incorporated into the water plans that the cities and the county have to do by the end of next year.
Any comments or questions? Okay, that's the programs and projects update. We'll move on to agenda item 4.3, permit 1704 Rolling Oak Circle. Staff.
Mr. Chair, we had 4 people that signed our sign-up sheet that are here today about that issue. And I'd like to ask that Carl explains to them what the purpose of this item is so that they're fully informed about how we proceed.
Mr. Chair, managers, this is a permit application for the city, from the city, for about 1,700 linear feet of roadway reconstruction. This is the entirety of Rolling Oak Circle, which is, I don't know if we can put that, by chance, can we put that map up that's in the packet or not? If so, I'll continue speaking anyways. But it's from County Road 42 south to its terminus. Actually, the drainage right now from that roadway is a rural section, gravel road. It kind of diffusely flows into the right-of-way, ditches on either side. Most of it's getting back up to County Road 42. As proposed, it'll be a 24-foot wide curb and gutter roadway. It'll be served by new storm sewer. And, the majority of the runoff is going to be routed to a new biofiltration pond up in the northwest portion of the project area that is now up on your screen. And so in existing conditions, it kind of diffusely flowed and got to some surrounding wetlands, but as it's all being curb and guttered and storm sewered to essentially one discharge point, the majority of flow now is actually, you can see a kind of a wooded feature to the north of County Road 42. That's a ditch. There's a culvert under County Road 42, and that ditch carries up through the Veerling property up over to Pike Lake. So actually, most of this runoff is going to be routed up north, a little bit different than existing conditions. So we reviewed the project design that the city proposed for compliance with district rule. In terms of stormwater management, the biofiltration basin proposed does meet district rate control requirements, so there'll be a reduction in rates coming off the site as a result of that pond. They will meet volume control pretty easily by one minor change to the depth of soil amendment in that feature, as well as perching the drain tile that's proposed. But as I've discussed with WSB so far, there's probably still going to be an issue with meeting the full letter of the rule for water quality, which states that you're supposed to either treat, infiltrate, or filtrate the 2-year 24-hour event, which right now they're approaching 50% of that goal in terms of treating that volume through the biofiltration media. We discussed options, either expansion of footprint or possibly looking at an increased depth of holding the water, but right now they're already at 2 feet. I would not suggest going deeper than that. It would convert it from kind of the maximum depth of a filtration device for having water and having vegetation that's going to survive in it to more of an open water feature with lower efficiency for treatment. So that wouldn't be the route to go. In terms of other aspects of natural resources, the wetlands that surround the corridor are well protected with double redundancy in some cases with erosion and sediment control. There's no floodplain concerns. There's no direct wetland impact concerns. So the items that you see listed under the my recommendation to staff for conditional approval may appear numerous. I have discussed those again with WSB and feel confident that they can address all but that first pending item under there, which is treating the full 24-hour or 2-year 24-hour stormwater volume. We've requested at this point response to this engineer's report and attempt to at least try to maximize the treatment and the volume that's treated, whether that be increased footprint or modifying design. And we believe that that will not be fully obtained, but we haven't seen a formal response back from the city on that front.
Managers, questions?
Mr. Chair, perhaps Jason Waddell would like to speak to this on behalf of the city.
Yes, yep, I was going to do that next. So Jason, would you like to come forward?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Again, my name is Jason Waddell. I'm with WSB, so I'm the one overseeing this project, but I'm also hired as the consultant public works director for the city of Prior Lake. So I'm representing WSB and the city tonight, both at the same time. So this project has been in the works for many, many years, as most of you probably know. And the stormwater biofiltration pond that we're proposing tonight is being located on private property. We have not acquired that property yet. Actually, representatives of the impacted property are in the audience here tonight, so that is still a portion of this project that needs to be worked through. That negotiation between the city and that property owner still needs to take place. What we tried to do was maximize the area that was available at that corner of Rolling Oaks and County Road 42. But we're very constrained with topography. It's all heavily wooded, so anything we do requires significant tree removal. And so what we did was try to use the most cost-effective methods that we could come up with to meet the TSS and phosphorus removals. So our design, as shown, we do hit the 90% suspended solids removal and the 60% phosphorus removal. So it was our understanding that per what Carl was mentioning, we're not meeting the storage volume that would normally be required, but the reason that's a requirement was to try to meet these water quality rules, and we're meeting the water quality through having sumps in every single one of the catch basins out there. We have SAFL baffles in every single one of the catch basins out there. They're going to be part of our ongoing maintenance program as far as getting them cleaned out every year. The streets are going to be similar to the rest of the city streets where they get swept 4 times a year. So we feel we're doing everything that needs to be done to hit the water quality without still necessarily meeting that 2-year, 24-hour storage requirement. If the only way we could increase the footprint of this pond would be to expand pretty extensively to the west onto an adjacent parcel, just because where we stop, the topography drops considerably off. So where the existing little creek runs through there to go towards the 42. So there's not a simple way to expand the pond. And if we were to increase the depth, consistent with Carl's comment, we're concerned if we're storing more than 2 feet of water, by the time it drains down, whatever vegetation we've planted in there is going to get killed off, and we're going to end up with a mud hole. And we don't want that either. We want something that's going to be nice. It's going to be in these people's front yard, basically, right in front of their houses. So we're trying to balance all of these things. So we feel that the design as proposed is the best solution and does meet the water quality requirements as far as the 90% TSS removal and 60% phosphorus.
Jason, there seems to be there's some discussion about that the rules might have changed for the design of this type of pond, and that this design reflects the old rules, not the new rules. I'll let Diane or Carl respond to that.
I would just note that the application submitted to the Watershed referenced, when it was going through the criteria to meet, referenced an old set of district rules, not the ones adopted in 2015.
But the current rules for phosphorus and TSS removal are the 90% and 60%, correct?
Yes, so it kind of gets into the weeds, but I agree with everything that Jason stated in terms of if the other design revisions that are itemized in the report are changed, which I don't see any problem, and I believe WSB agrees that they can change everything else except for trying to filter that 2-year volume, that if those changes are made, they will meet the 60-90% performance standard. It's more of a letter of the rule as it's worded to filter that 2-year event. But the performance goal in the end, as I mentioned at the workshop, would be obtained if they can address every other point that's listed in the engineer's report.
So Jason, going back to the schedule for this project, I mean, apparently all we're missing is a response. And I guess the question the board has is, could we get that response within a month, and would that delay the project?
So first to address what Carl just mentioned. So the rest of Carl's conditions of approval, numbers 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, we agree 100%. We can take care of those items. That'll be addressed in the current plans. Right now, this project is out for bid. We're trying to get as much of this project built yet before winter hits. So right now, the bid opening is later this month. This is going to the City Council in their September 5th meeting for approval of the bids and awarding the contract, and construction would hopefully start within a week or so after that. So we are on a very tight time frame.
Okay, so this board could meet on the 29th of August. Could we get a response by then and issue the permit at that time?
And I guess I'm not fully understanding what additional response you're looking for.
I think we were looking for a response to the fact that you're number one. I think we all agree with 2 through 6 is workable, but we've not had a formal response that changing this proposed language for number 1 or requesting a variation from number 1.
So I guess I was under the impression that that's what I was just explaining tonight, was we're proposing to stick with the plans the way we have them shown, because we're meeting with doing all the other things, we're meeting the intent of the rules, which is the 90% total TSS removals. And
this, it doesn't go on. That we need something on record, we need a letter, we need some, we unfortunately had the circumstance before where we don't have a complete file when we issue the permit. Carl.
Mr. Chair, maybe just as a suggestion, I think what the board really wants to see is, not to put words in your mouth, but is the due diligence behind, an exercise that would, I guess, at least illustrate the constraints that are in front of the city to even attempt to get to that filtering in a larger footprint. What is the constraints, and have the watershed concur with that and understand that better. I believe that's what's being asked.
is that correct?
I couldn't have said it better myself.
Okay. I mean, we can certainly do that. I mean, it's going to cost time and money to put that together, and I guess the thought is if we're meeting the water quality treatment requirements, I guess I'm not understanding what difference does it make.
Mr. Chair. I guess the way that the words are ruled, the rules are worded right now, it doesn't specifically mention the performance standard as it did in the old rules. And so what we're stuck with, or what we have to review based on, is what the rules say now. And it's to retain, filter, or infiltrate that 2-year volume. And I'm not, I guess my opinion on behalf of the board is not suggesting a exhaustive engineering exercise, but more so just a narrative form of what exactly, you know, the due diligence that the city went through to look at, and obviously recognize whatever constraints there are, if there is topography issues and landowner constraints. I think that's what you're not looking for, a whole nother revision to the plan to show that you can't do that revision to the plan just for the sake of doing that.
Manager Howley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Let me go about it a different way. If an applicant for a permit is not meeting a rule, yet they need to, do they need to submit a variance or request a variance?
Mr. Chair, Manager Howley, not in this case, in that the district's own rules allow for departure from the rules if it's demonstrated that practices are, I think the language is incorporated to the max extent practicable. So no, there's not a need for a variance because of the language of the rules as they exist.
Okay, understood, but we still need a demonstration that to the best extent practical, they've met our rules. That's what we're looking for.
Other managers. Manager Brightback.
Yeah, I guess that sounds good to me. I guess I would want to know what the changes are being made and how you are going to attain those changes, and a letter of good faith to those changes, and an explanation of why you can't do the other. And I don't know if that's what you were kind of alluding to, Fred, but I think I would be happy with something like that. That would say, yes, these are the changes we're going to do, and this is how we're going to do it, and this is why we can't do this one. I don't know if that makes any sense.
And that's, if it's a narrative explaining, I can totally do that. I just didn't want to have an engineer drafting contour plans and showing, spending city resources on something that may or may not be.
No, that's my understanding of what we're looking for.
Okay.
Is
Yep.
Just not leaving these things to the last minute. So
Yep.
We have to take an action today, and we're hearing some of our consultants say that the file isn't complete. So would you be comfortable, again, we're meeting on the 28th of August, would you be comfortable that you could get that
Yes.
narrative back to us by then? And Carl, would that satisfy your concern? Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Manager Howley. Jason, maybe, do you need?
Yeah, I think so. Thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple questions, thinking ahead. Rolling Oaks, the properties on Rolling Oaks are they acre, 2 acre? How big are they? And the reason why I'm asking, are there future plans that could likely resolve subdivision? Tear down one house and build 2 houses, what have you. And if that happens, would then some more of our rules get triggered for additional stormwater BMPs that would have to happen at that time with the individual lot splits, if you will, that could, all of a sudden now start chipping away and offset the kind of the shortage that we're having here? And I don't know that anybody could necessarily answer that question, but if you can see where my head is going, is there opportunities in the future based on the existing properties for future BMPs?
Jason, I see some heads nodding. They're not an acre, less than an acre?
No, they some of the properties within Rolling Oaks would definitely have the potential to subdivide once they're served with municipal sewer and water. So right now there's 10 lots within that subdivision. It's anticipated that at most it could maybe be 20 lots if people chose to subdivide their properties in the future.
Okay, any other questions for Jason? Thank you, Jason. Managers, what's your pleasure? Manager Hennis.
I think President Corrigan,
Hang on 1 minute.
did those people
Manager
want to say anything?
I asked earlier if anybody wanted.
No, I don't. Did anyone want to speak about the street project here? No?
All right.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm sorry. I thought we'd taken care of that. But if there's any comments, let us know. Either tonight or later, it would be fine. Manager Hennis.
President Corrigan, my opinion is we should delay this, a short delay till the August, is the 29th meeting, and get the letter in from Jason, and it'll give us a little more time to kind of look things over. And since we're going to have a special meeting then anyway, we could put that on the agenda and vote on that.
Okay, so Manager Hennis, I think you said we will table the item till a future date specified, which would be August 29th, and provide the applicant with direction on the issues that have been discussed.
Correct, that's my motion.
Is there a second?
Yeah, I'll second that, and of course, that's pending receipt of a response from the city.
Manager Hennis moves it. Manager Spitzmuller seconds. Is there any other discussion? Manager Hawley.
Yeah, I would, Mr. Chair, I mean, I would be fine with approving based on these conditions and just make that into a condition, but I'm not going to throw up a big stink about whether we approve it or table it, so I guess I'm okay, but I would be comfortable with actually approving it with conditions as stated.
And I think that's why I was concerned about the schedule. If you're ready to dig into the ground tomorrow, then probably we would look at this differently. But if that resolves your concerns, if we take care of it in 2 weeks, and we're good. Okay. Any other comments from the managers? All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, motion passes 5-0. Thank you all. Moving on in the agenda to item 4.4, which is an action item, Resolution 17-315, Clean Water Fund Proposal. Diane?
Mr. Chair and Managers, this is simply indicating to the Board of Water and Soil Resources that you know that we are applying for a grant for alum treatment of Upper Pryor, and that we can go ahead with submitting that.
Okay, and the topic is outlined on page 19th, including the resolution. Are there any other comments or questions about the resolution on page 19? So the motion is therefore...
Mr. President, I'll make a motion to adopt Resolution 17-315 that states, therefore be it resolved that the Prior Lake Spring Lake Watershed District Managers supports submittal of a grant proposal for alum treatment of Upper Prior Lake.
I'd like to second that.
Moved by Manager Hennis, second by Manager Spitzmuller. I believe we need to finish that, Manager Hennis. So be it further that the board instructs staff to apply for a Clean Water Fund grant. Are you comfortable with that? Just a question here. Can we just put some language in about, we want to be very clear to our constituents what kind of time frame we're talking about the possibility of this alum treatment taking place or not taking place?
Mr. Chair, so are you suggesting that we've got that it's a 2018 to 20 grant?
Well, I think what I'm looking for is I assume that you would submit the grant immediately, correct? For a future alum treatment on date undetermined?
Right. Yeah, if we get the grant, if the grant is accepted, then it would be for a future date.
If required.
I'm sorry, I don't know what you're asking me.
Well, I'm not sure we're clear when we're going to do an alum treatment on Upper Prairie Lake. And I want
Mr. President, can I add something? Maybe this will clear it up.
Manager
What
Hennis.
we want to know is there a timeline on this that can be forecast as far as Bowser getting back to us? As far as getting a
No,
decision?
actually, Manager Hennis,
No.
I was more concerned about what the time frame for this grant might be.
Mr. Chair, managers, the grant fund is for 2018 through 2020. So the alum treatment would be in that time frame. So we're anticipating if we get the funds, it would be 2019 or 2020.
That we would have the funds to go ahead if we choose to go ahead in that period of time.
Yes.
I'm just trying to be clear with everybody who lives on Upper Prairie Lake that this isn't going to happen tomorrow. May not happen next year, may not happen at all
Correct.
in this period of time.
Yes.
By 2020.
Well, if we get the grant, however, we do need to spend the money by 2020, which is the end of that year.
Okay.
Could we put in there some language there that covers that when the science, something about when the science supports the alum treatment within that time frame, that's when we'll do it.
So, Diane, maybe is the grant to do the work, no question, or is the grant to study an alum treatment?
No, unfortunately, or fortunately, actually,
The
you
feasibility.
had hired EOR to put together a management plan, and that is what we're considering a feasibility study, and we are defending that with the Board of Water and Soil Resources. They will not pay for a feasibility study. They will pay for the actual treatment, and so this grant proposal is for the actual treatment, one treatment, to occur somewhere in that grant period, 2018 to 2020.
Okay, if we give you a few minutes, can you write the resolution to reflect that time frame?
Sure.
Then we'll come back to
Okay.
4.4.
So maybe if you want to, we could have Sue do her presentation, her conservation intern presentation, and then come back to me. Thank you.
Sounds like a good idea.
Mr. Chair?
Sue, go ahead.
One quick thing on this.
Manager Huff.
And I think this is what you're driving at. Should we successfully receive the grant, and we choose not to move forward with an alum treatment, there's no penalties. We don't have to spend the money. We just choose not to.
Or is it a contract that we're contracted that we must go forward?
Okay. Mr. Chair, members, it is highly advisable that you do not accept money and then not do the project, because very honestly, you get blacklisted. So
No, and-
that's why we're doing the resolution, is to tell
Yep.
the Board of Soil and Water Resources that we have the support to go ahead and apply for this grant.
Okay, so going back to Manager Howley, I guess there's two timeframes here. One is that if the board is comfortable passing this resolution, the timeframe for an alum treatment on Upper Prairie Lake would be 2018 to 2020.
Yet we have a checklist that says when we should and shouldn't do one, and we haven't even reviewed it yet.
Right, so that takes us back to the board's comfort level in making this application. And my understanding from you, Diane, is that it's due tomorrow night? Is this
Mr. Chair, managers, yes, it's due by 4:30 tomorrow.
for this year's cycle or?
2018 to 2020.
Okay, so we could.
It's a 3-year term.
If the board isn't comfortable getting blacklisted, we could come back next year for a 19 to 21
Sure.
period? Okay, clear as mud with everybody. Manager Hennis.
Mr. Prentice, if I can say one thing, these are going to be very competitive bids. There's going to be a lot of people standing in line, and if at all possible, we want to get as close to the front of the line of this as possible.
And I don't disagree with that at all. I just don't want to put the board in the position of deciding a vote we haven't taken yet.
Mr. Chair, Carl Elmer wants to say something.
If I could, the Upper Prior Lake alum treatment study, the science is there. It's clear. It's from the TMDL, it's from the implementation plan, it's from looking at the various options. The way to address Upper Prior Lake is to address the internal load is clearly the most cost-effective is alum. And I guess the acceptance of that report, I thought we were all on the same page there, and that maybe the barrier was really how and if and when you could ever finance it. So I guess the thing that I would remind the board on this grant is it's 20% local funds and 80% state dollars. So that seemed to be a great idea from Diane to move forward to try to maybe get you over the hurdle of that financial aspect. Just my 2 cents.
Well, and I think, Carl, if we only had one lake that we were working with, I'm just not sure that we've gone all the way through that process to where we made the decision as to which project should go ahead in what order, and whether going ahead with this resolution might preclude our ability to go ahead with Spring Lake in a timely manner.
Mr. Chair, managers, I did ask the Board of Water and Soil Resources to see if they would fund the second alum treatment for spring, if that would be something that would meet their criteria, and they told me no. So that's why we went to Upper Prior. And I certainly respectfully understand, we actually put that alum treatment checklist together for you to help you out. And of course, you're going to need to go through that to make the final determination. But we didn't want to lose the window of opportunity to try to get some money for this if we could, because that was what was really one of the major things holding it back.
And I suspect there's support on the board for this resolution, but we just need to be clear with our constituents. Manager Spitzmueller.
Thank you, President Corrigan. Yeah, no, I agree that the board hasn't necessarily voted on a resolution to apply alum in Upper Prior. However, I think this board is proceeding and has expended significant resources in that direction. We were advised that as a first step, we need to eliminate carp, and that's what we have WSB's capable assistance, and we are moving in that direction. So I have no hesitation in supporting this resolution.
Mr. Chair, I guess I agree with Woody that all that stuff has been in place, and the fact that if we are able to get this grant, we've got 2018, 2019, all the way through 2020 to spend it. So we've got 3 years to get all the rest of our ducks in a row.
Okay, let's let Diane do some word magic here, and we'll come back to that. And if Sue's ready to come up to the podium and. Welcome.
Mr. Chair and managers, thank you very much for giving me some of your time to share with you my awesome experience with the Watershed District for this summer. So for who haven't met me yet, Suhaila Al-Banna, and student at St. Olaf, and everybody calls me Sue. I'm double majoring with political science and environmental studies, and my first interest in policy and the environment came actually from back home, because back home is filled with water, but we don't know how to actually manage and regulate these waters. And I knew about this project from one of my professors who knew my interest in these policy and the environment, and told me this experience would actually add to your resume and actually lead you to the right way to start with your dream. I have done a lot of work before with my professors when it comes to research and internship with about the environment. I have done research with my professors about milkweed and how it helps the environment. I have done an internship in past summer about also plants and how they actually tend to reserve some of the waters and our environment. So some of the work that I have done with the Watershed District till now for the past 10 weeks was conservation of the easements. Through this experience, I learned how these easements and how creating these buffers tend to help water and how these kind of buffers help the water to stay clean and how to actually conserve these easements, what type of things to look for when you go and to inspect these easements. Had the chance to meet with a lot of people, chat with them, learn about their concerns when it came to the environment and how we can actually go forward with further conserving these easements. I also had the chance to work with Maggie, specifically with, on the permit inspections. This was one of my most interesting things that I have done through the summer because it actually combines the policy that I really want to learn about and the environment. I knew about the laws and the regulation when it came to construction sites in relation to the water resources and water bodies around them. So it was really awesome to get to know new people on the sites, know what kind of work they do, and some of the ways through which stormwater get into these water bodies without polluting it. I have had the chance to learn a lot about the Watershed District through doing an overview kind of about the Watershed District that you might see soon on the webpage of the Watershed District. I also had the chance to work with some of the people, including Mary, when it came to the carbon management and biobays, where I went with Mary to a lot of these sites and helped build these barriers and the antennas to track these carp fish and kind of know from where they're going so that we can decrease the population of this non-native species. I got the chance to know about this fish because, to be honest, I didn't know about it before. So I got to know even more about it through one of the tours that we have done like kind of past week. So it was super interesting to get to know new people in the field and know what kind of work they do. I also got the chance to learn how to ride a boat, because I have never driven a boat before, so it was pretty cool. And I get a chance to learn about some of the tools, the equipments that they use to track these fish through my work with Mary as well. And finally, I was working on the Spring Lake Parcel project, where, as you know, they restored this shore and they put this beautiful signs, but they needed extra kind of plants to make it even more beautiful. So I had to do my research on what kind of plants would mostly fit this kind of site. Also look for the best way to represent these flowers for the people who come to this site. So I had to pick the plants and pick the signs and put it all together. And hopefully we're going to get the flowers on and the plants on Monday, and we're going to plant them. So if you pass by, you're going to be able to see my kind of work. So that was me. It was an awesome experience. I hope to come back next summer to do even more awesome stuff and to bring even more stuff to the watershed and take more stuff from the watershed. Thank you.
Well, we hope we will. Thank you for your presentation, and thank you for all your hard work. It's been fun having you here. Managers, any other comments?
I'd just like to point out, Sue, thank you for your hard work. I know John isn't here, but he's done a similar effort, and we really appreciate it. Your time with us has been terrific, and we look forward to seeing you again, maybe down the road, and wish you nothing but the best.
Thank you very much for giving me the space and the time and the effort to actually teach me about these things, because it was awesome, and I hope to actually see you and work with you later on. Thank you.
Okay, Diane, you got this figured out?
Okay, Mr. Chair, I have an attempt here, and see what you think. Now, you'll see that I'm going one direction with this, and we can talk about it. So this is down at the therefore be it resolved paragraph. So therefore be it resolved that the PLSLWD Board of Managers supports submittal of a grant proposal for alum treatment of Prior Lake, which, if approved, would help fund one alum treatment in the 2018 to 2020 grant period. And then picks up at be it further resolved. So I don't say something specifically about the alum checklist because what I think that would do is give a mixed message.
Okay, one more time for the slower members of the board, like me.
Sure. Therefore, be it resolved that the PLSLWD Board of Managers supports submittal of a grant proposal for alum treatment of Upper Prior Lake, which, if approved, would help fund one alum treatment in the 2018-2020 grant period.
Works for me. Managers, any other comments or questions, suggestions? I think we had a motion. Manager Hennis?
Yes.
So why don't we start over and
I will,
as amended?
yeah, I'll make the motion as amended with Diane's language, which, if approved, would fund one alum treatment for the period of 2018 through 2020. Then be it further resolved that the board instructs staff to apply for a Clean Water Fund grant from the Minnesota Board of Soil and Water Resources. I make that motion.
I'll second the
Seconded by
amended motion.
Manager Spitzmueller. Any other comments, questions, suggestions? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes 5-0. Knew we'd get there. Moving on to agenda item 4.5, SWCD second quarter cost share recipients. There is an invoice on page 21, I believe.
Yes, Mr. Chair and members, when we get these quarterly reports from the SWCD, I've indicated that I will present them to you. And in this case, we have two projects that received support from us. One is conservation cover for Ernest and Denise Moen. And you can see that they had a little over 3 acres that were protected as a part of this project. So they had runoff from their crop fields that drained into a nearby stream, and they also wanted to improve the wildlife habitat, and they have planted native grasses, flowers, and a food plot. And you can see that area is designated there at the aerial view of the project site. And then we have Dallas Eldine well decommissioning, and this well decommissioning happens when a homeowner is connected to city water and sewer. And so the well has to be made inoperable because of the opportunity for pollution to go into the aquifer. So in this case, we assisted them with $1,000 for their decommissioning. The cooperator spent $548, and in the Moen conservation cover, we had the flip of that. The cooperator paid more, $950, whereas we paid $650.
Mr. President, I have a question, please.
Manager Hennis.
Dan, what is the maximum for this well decommissioning? For some reason, I had 250 is floating around in my head, but that must be wrong. What is the max that we will contribute to a well decommissioning?
Mr. Chair, members, it's a percentage of the cost for the well decommissioning because it varies. I can't remember what quite that percentage is.
Thank you. All right.
So Diane, this is an information or an action?
Sorry, Mr. Chair?
Is this an information item or?
That was just an information item, just to let you know that we received the quarterly bill with the projects listed and just to go over them with you.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Looks like some good work being done. Hearing none, we will move on to agenda item 4.6, conservation. We've done that, and we're moving right along here. 4.7, staff presentation. Maggie, permitting overview, your favorite topic.
Mr. Chair, managers, So this year, we've had a larger influx of permit requests than normal, and we've also been doing some innovative things to try to close some old permits and to work with some of the older permit holders to close those out. And Diane had suggested that we do a quick permit overview of the program to kind of give the public as well as the managers a better sense of what we're trying to do and how far we've come. So I'm going to go through the why, what, how. So first, why does the Watershed District issue permits in the first place? Well, land construction activities, land alteration activities can affect the rate, the volume, and the quality of the water that's reaching our precious water resources. And so through our district rules, which is provided to us by Minnesota state law, we permit for different things, such as we look at the wetlands, we look at erosion control and disturbance, we look at stormwater. There's a variety of different things that are protected by our rules, and when people permit through us, we're looking through the lens of those rules to see if they're doing all that they can to make sure that they're not going to cause flooding downstream, that they're not going to cause detrimental water quality issues to our water resources. We're making sure that all the water resources in the district are staying clean, good, and there's not going to be any flooding issues. So when does the Watershed District issue a permit? Well, we have equivalencies with the City of Prior Lake, the City of Savage, and the county. So, and with the county, it's in the unincorporated areas. And with those three, they have equivalent rules to us. So if somebody is gonna, their construction project issues one of our permits, they're going to be the one-stop shop for that permit. They're not going to have to get a permit both through us and then the city or the county. And so it depends on the location of the area as to how much land disturbance is going to trigger a permit. So if they're in the shoreline protection zone, which is within 1,000 feet of a lake or a wetland, or within 300 feet of the Prior Lake outlet channel, it's going to trigger the permit. If they're outside of that shoreline protection zone, then it's an acre. And so once that threshold gets triggered, they have to apply for a permit with the Watershed District. And so first they apply for a permit. They have to do that within 14 days of our board meeting. After we receive that, we make sure that it's complete, and then we send it off to EOR for review. So they're reviewing it. We're also reviewing it for completeness. We send a notice to people who live within 500 feet of that construction area. And then we provide like a staff recommendation for that based on EOR's review as well as staff review. And once it goes to the board and they either approve or deny the permit, there's almost always conditional requirements on that permit that Carl finds or that we just kind of standardly put on the permit that they have to get to us before we issue it. So in the case of the city, as we've seen with this 1704 permit, they had a bunch of conditions they would have to meet. And other ones like Living Hope Church, they might have to get us a permit security, which allows us to withhold funds that we make sure that they put all their stormwater requirements in before the permit is closed. But once they do that, then we issue them the permit, and then the fun begins. So what Sue was doing this summer and what John was doing this summer, as well as myself, is going out to inspect these permit projects. We typically inspect them on the same schedule that the cities do, although we don't always meet that requirement. So it's once every week or within 24 hours after a rain event. And we're looking for a variety of things. These 4 pictures that you see in front of you are all from permit inspections from this year. And so these are ones that have gone wrong, that we are going to alert the erosion control inspector on site and let them know that they need to resolve these. The first one that you can see is just street sweeping. This is after a heavy rainfall event, and it's an easy thing. They just have to come with a street sweeper and sweep it off. But you can see like the mud tracking here. And this was towards the end of the day when I was about to leave. And so they needed to come out there and street sweep before the next rainfall. The next one is the inlet protections. So when you see a construction site, you're going to see these little orange inlet protections in the stormwater sewers. And these get filled up. If they're filled up like you see in this picture, we're going to, again, call the erosion control inspector and say, you need to get somebody out here and clean those out. We don't want those clogged up. If it does clog up, there's like a little space on the top that it can kind of overflow and get dirty water into the storm sewer, so we don't want that. The third picture is just BMPs functioning. This was a site where they had actually done everything that they should have done. They had redundant BMPs, they had a biolog that you can't see in this picture, but then they had a silt fence beyond that, and it was still leaking, kind of muddy water into an area that's adjacent to a wetland. So we saw this. This was actually during a rain event, so we called them and let them know that this is what we were seeing. After this event, they had ended up putting rock down by that silt fence just to add some additional filtration before it can get to that point. But even in the best scenario, stuff goes wrong. And then the last one is just some dewatering that we saw on site at one of the locations. Dewatering is supposed to be done like into a filter bag and into a grassy area. This one, they were just dewatering through some rock and then into the storm drain. It does look like it was supposed to go through a filter bag, but you could kind of see that it was bypassing the storm sewer somehow and getting around it. So all of these things we're keeping an eye on constantly, calling people, going to construction meetings, just making sure that all the activities on our permitted sites are doing the best that they possibly can do. And then there's also some other things listed on the bottom of this slide that you can see. There's just a variety of things that we're looking for. So new in 2017, we worked really hard at this. Normally when you go to a construction site, we had a form that wasn't exactly slick, and it made it difficult because then you have to go back to the office, match up the photos, put in comments. This new phone app that we were able to kind of work with an existing app and then just alter it specifically for our needs. It's only like $40 a month, but it is very slick. You can be in the field and take a photo, which it'll add instantly to this form. And then while you're in the field, if there's a big issue, you can email it to that person right on the spot. So it really made things a lot easier in 2017, and we're pretty happy with it. We also did the same for our conservation easements as well, but this one specifically has been very helpful. And then I just wanted to kind of go through a permit summary of so I started back in 2015, and when I came here, there was a whole bunch of old permits that we were trying to close out, and we knew it was going to be a handful. We're making some progress. We're getting there. I don't know if we'll ever be complete, but we're getting there. So the first year when I started, we had 21 old permits, and we got issued 1 new permit. And then we were able to close out a whole bunch in 2016 when we did that lawn aeration program, trying to get rid of some of those that had soil mitigation requirements. And then we were down to 14, and then we just had 1 new one. But every time we have 1 new one, it takes a year or 2 to close that out. So then we add it to the blue in the following year. So now we're down to 13 old ones that we're still waiting to close out. But we had 4 new ones this year, so we'll see what next year holds. But we're trying to do some creative things to try to close out these old permits. So last year we closed out those 5 permits because we did that lawn aeration program, just again trying to figure out creative solutions. And then this year we just utilized an old permit security that we had for this old 515 permit, where they had never done the rain garden. They had, just barely met the requirements. We were working with Carl to make sure that they met everything that they needed to, but this was one of those things that just had to be done. So we utilized that permit security, and we're getting it done, and hopefully this year or next, we're going to close out that one finally as well. And part of this is also negotiating with some of these old permits holders. The 5 that you see on the bottom that are listed, they're all with Shamrock Development. And so these all have different varying amounts of permit security still available. One of the major ones only has $3,500 in permit securities, but they were required to put 3 conservation easements in that were never done. And this was back in, I think it was the 2005 one. So as you can imagine, people have bought these lots and changed ownership, and there's no way we could go back to those people and ask them for an easement now. But there is, between all of these, there's over $40,000 in permit securities. So we're working with Shamrock Development to see if we can withhold some of the permit securities from other old permits as sort of like a payment for those easements that are missing, that we could apply towards future conservation projects that would have the same kind of filtration and water quality that we would be missing from those easements. So we're getting there, we're figuring it out, we're closing some old permits, but it just takes time. But we're in it for the long haul, and we're starting to see some results. So looking forward to getting some new ideas and some next steps. One of the things Diane mentioned at, I think it was the last board meeting, is that I'm trying to pull together this session that we're going to have at the MAUD annual meeting that will take a look at all of the bigger watershed districts that do permitting and see what they're doing and learn from their mistakes and their successes. Because the smaller ones, we don't talk to each other that much. And the MAUD meetings that I've been to, they don't really talk about permits and regulation and what to do when things go wrong. And so I've been talking to other watershed districts and getting more ideas, and specifically Capital Region Watershed District in Ramsey, Washington. And I'm really building on some good ideas, and it's going to keep going if this session gets approved at MAUD. But one of the things that was interesting to me was the permit security amounts. So right now we gather $1,000 per disturbed acre in permit security. But what other watersheds are doing are $2,000 to $5,000. So we're actually on the low end. And honestly, if something went wrong, if they didn't install one of those stormwater features, we likely wouldn't have the funds to put that in if that developer went under, or whoever holds that permit, like if Living Hope Church couldn't fulfill their end of the bargain. So it's just something to think about as we're revising our rules. Another interesting thing was Ramsey, Washington had a letter grade, kind of like we were discussing with like the lakes having a letter grade. They have a letter grade on their inspection forms. So their inspectors know right away, oh, I'm getting an A, everything's perfect, great. Or gosh, I'm getting a D, I better, get into shape. One of the things that Ramsey, Washington also does is they do a fee. So like if you're an A or a B, that's great, please improve these small things, go ahead and move on. But if you go down to a C, they start charging you a fee for every time they have to go out there and inspect it. And so technically we're not able to issue like fees as you think of them, like I'm going to charge you like $100 for this. But we're able to recall some of those costs of us going out to the site. And so they did an assessment, and they said, okay, it's going to cost us $60 to drive out there for staff time, for administrative costs. So every time, if it's a C or below, they go out there, they charge against that permit security $60, which I think is a great idea. But I have to look into that further. But so that's just some of the ideas that I'm kind of pulling from these other watershed districts. Another thing we have to do moving forward is develop some stronger enforcement procedures, kind of like we did with the conservation easements. So when my time at the watershed district is done, like somebody else can take those procedures that we created and we passed, and they can just follow those, and there's no question about what you should do. And we don't have that for permits yet. And so doing something like that where somebody can just, take in when I leave and just know what they need to do, like if there's, 3 repeated violations of the same thing, like here's the steps that you take, I think it'll be invaluable to future staff. And then, of course, as Diane had mentioned, we're also updating our district rules, which include some of those fee structures and security amounts that we should definitely be thinking about. And we also need to update those city equivalency agreements. So these are all things that we need to think about moving forward with permits and the next steps that we're taking to improve the program and get it to the place that we want to moving forward. And that's it. Any questions?
Great. Thank you for the presentation, and as always, thanks for your enthusiasm. I'm not sure that this isn't the most thankless job in the district, but you certainly seem to be making some progress with it. I assume, though, the number of the project is project number and year. Is that what that indicates? So 0505 would be the 5th project. And
Mr. Chair, that's correct. Yeah, the first 2 numbers are always the year.
So a number of these projects obviously are quite old because there's some '02s and '05s. What would you expect in a normal, not extraordinary project with your new permits? What would be your hope to close those permits? What time frame?
Mr. Chair, I would say 2 years maximum. So my first year here, we issued the 1501 Wishtown Road permit, and so that just closed this year. They had a few items that needed to be wrapped up, but that closed this year. So within 2 years is reasonable. 1 year would be fantastic.
And so having built a number of homes, and I know that final checklist when you move into a new home, you leave things like railings going downstairs and things. And I notice the city gets back to you eventually. Sometimes that's 2 years later to close out. Is there an incentive for the permit holder to close it out? Have you noticed with any of the other districts some incentive to get that done, or is it just a matter of you following up and saying, let's close this out?
Mr. Chair, managers, usually they're looking to get back that permit security, which is, again, why it's important to have it at a large amount. We're kind of unique with the city. The other watershed districts that I've talked to don't actually charge the city's contractors a permit security, which they all have mentioned they have struggled with, because then there's nothing, again, to motivate them to close these permits. So, but that's what we have holding us. Like with Mushtown, charred one of their money back. So of course they would come and they'd try to wrap everything up. So I think the security is really key to enforcement, because we're limited in the fact that watershed districts can't assess fees as they're commonly known. We have to kind of do this permit security dance, if you will.
And you mentioned the amount of the fee, and I think we had that discussion. We could have gone higher, but I think we were thinking of our constituents, and yes, there's some risk that we might lose some money on some of these permits, but we didn't feel the need to go to a higher scale that you're seeing in some of the other, perhaps. We'll take that chance. Managers, any other questions or comments? Hennis.
Mr. Chair, Manager Hennis, so with the permit securities, it depends on how you received it. And actually, it's a good point that you brought up, because the permit securities that we get in the form of like a bond, they're harder to get and harder to access, and they expire. So if you don't keep an eye on it, like a lot of these old permit projects, previous staff didn't keep an eye on it, and they expired, and now it's gone, and I have nothing to motivate these people to close it out. It's the ones where we accepted cash that we can hold on to that forever. Although we wouldn't. Some of these are older permits that if we had any leftover money, we'd have to abandon it to the state. But we keep it basically as long as we need to. But that's what the other watershed districts that I talked to, Capital Region and Ramsey, Washington, they take only cash up to a certain point. I think it's a $10,000 threshold maybe. And then after that, they'll take a bond. But like, up into that $10,000, that's all cash, and that's very easy to track and highly motivated by the contractor to get back.
Do you have a total ballpark figure roughly of how much money we're holding?
Oh, Manager Hennis, we have, I think we're down to 60-some thousand now. I'd have to double check that. But,
$60,000?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's over 40 just alone by Shamrock Development, which is why we're trying to close those out.
Sure.
And the other ones are just smaller ones.
If I can just add one more thing, Mr. President. When I came on and became president, one of the first things I sat down with former Administrator Kinney was the easement thing, because I had seen the backlog. And he basically said, he just kind of threw his hands up in the air and says, there's nothing we can do right now. It's going to be a long, long slog, and the paperwork on this is almost unbelievable. Maggie and Catherine both have done great work on this. To get it down just to where it is now has done yeoman service for the Watershed District, and I'm sure you'll continue it. But this was a sorry situation back in 2013, I'll tell you. Thank you.
So Maggie, at what point do you
Mr. Chair, managers, so there was, I think back last year, there was one permit that hadn't met the requirements. We had no security, and the developer had gone under. We couldn't locate them. So closing that one out, I had to consult with Chuck on that and say, can we just close it out and just, you know, close it out without like a certificate of completion like we normally have? And he said, sure, just write a memo to the file, document it, and put it in there. So we have closed out really old ones. Does that answer your question?
I think so. I was just wondering whether you had a process or we need a process, or you just want to get rid of them and hope we never have to deal with them again. Thank you. Manager Spitzmuller.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. Yeah, I also appreciate your report, Maggie, and, you know, we'll probably need toward the end of the year to address your concerns, Kurt, too, to get together with Chris, and we do report on those restricted funds each month, and that number kind of never changes, so your comments are interesting. I think we need to review that with our accountant and get a better handle on exactly what kind of money we're holding.
Manager Howley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So if we want to make changes to our permitting program, that can be done with our rules revisions that are going to start next week, right?
Manager Howley, yep, that's right. That's where it starts.
Great. Any other comments? Maggie, thank you as always. Okay, I think we're down to the consent agenda at right on time, 8:02. The consent agenda is considered as one item of business. It consists of routine administrative items or items not requiring discussion. Items can be removed from the consent agenda at the request of the board member, staff member, or a member of the audience. Please state which item or items you wish to remove for separate discussion. In your packet, there are meeting minutes from the July 11th board workshop and the July 11th board meeting, and also the most recent July 27th CAC minutes. I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Manager Howley moves.
I will second.
Manager Spitz seconds. Any other comments, questions, changes, additions? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none opposed, the motion passes 5-0. Moving on to the treasurer's report. Manager Spitzmuller.
Thank you, President Corrigan. Not a lot of excitement here this month. Things are tracking along. Just a comment. I didn't see Chris Shadows, our accountant's cash report when it's submitted yesterday. So there's a couple of hand amendments, I guess I would suggest, to my colorful report. We are, at this point, year-to-date, the district expenditures are about $604,000, if you want to modify these as we go down. So the 547.26 is now about 604,000, which is about 43% spent. And our JPMOA is up to 147,000, which is about 13.5% spent. So I apologize. I didn't see Chris's report when it was submitted yesterday. On the report, I guess, you know, again, tracking, you know, percent spent sometimes is difficult to predict, and tracking that's difficult. But one item that does stand out, at least in my mind, would be monitoring. Jamie, do you know why it looks to me like we're way, way, way behind expenditures, behind our plan there. Chris's report shows us about 11% spent in that area.
Just going off memory here, the vegetation surveys that Steve McComas does, I think is around $17,000. He always bills his at the end of the year, so we don't see that till December or so. And then the same with the Three Rivers park monitoring, which is around $13,000. And let's see.
So
what
some
else.
of that hasn't been billed yet, is what you're saying, huh?
Right, a lot of it comes later on.
Okay.
And it looks like that wetland restoration, are you specifically looking at the district monitoring program line item or the whole monitoring and research category?
No, in general, your answer is
Yeah.
great. I mean, I anticipated, obviously, things are, our expenditures are coming in later than what we anticipated.
Right.
Yep. All right, any other questions that I can answer? We're doing okay as far as our Klein Bank account remains in relative good shape, about 822,000. We still have about 850 at Northland, and that, Diane has just moved up, but underneath the green there, that shows our contingency reserves, which the 177 is our current estimate on permit deposits and unspent grants. So I think that number needs to be reviewed here going forward. But otherwise, we have about $750,000 of committed or district reserve funds, which I think are significantly covered up there with our assets at Northland.
I'm sorry, did you say 177 somewhere, or did I mishear you? Oh, up here, okay, thank you.
That will, going forward, I think we'll get together with Chris and kind of review that with Maggie and Chris.
Great, any questions on the treasurer's report? Cash and investments, Manager Howley.
Just going back to that thing about Mr. McComas not billing us till the end of the year, is that because that's what he chooses to do? Is he, I mean, for us monitoring our budgets, it would sure be nice to get an invoice within 30 days of him doing his work, but is there some sort of gentleman's agreement with him that he likes to do it that way, or?
Yeah, I think he honestly is just too busy to deal with it during the summer. He's such a busy guy, and we have asked him, because normally we wouldn't get it until I think even January, so we've had to ask him, like, could you just try to get it to us by December? But we know exactly what it's going to be. It doesn't really waver. We have a contract, and I think it's, to the penny, so we know how to plan for that. And same with the Three Rivers Park District monitoring, so I don't know if there's any reason besides we just want to see it kind of checked off, but we know it's coming and we know how much it's going to be, so that's how he does it.
So Three Rivers does some work for us. Do they charge us for that work?
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
Three Rivers does some monitoring and reporting?
Three Rivers Park District does the lake sampling for us.
Where does that show up?
That's in the line item that says District Monitoring Program.
Okay, thank you. All right, that's where I thought. Okay, any questions, comments? Let's move on to the claims list. Are there any questions on the claims list? It's been revised up to 76,000 with some additions in the last day or two. Hearing no, I would accept a motion to approve the claims list.
So moved.
Manager Hennis.
Second.
Manager Breitbach. Any other comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 5-0. And I believe we have a CAC meeting coming up on August 31st. Is there any other upcoming meetings or events that we need to know about? Again, thanks to everyone for their work this weekend at the booth. I think we certainly had a lot of people coming through, especially young people.
Mr. President, I have a question. What is the status of our Fish Point Park get-together? Is that still going to happen yet this fall? Do you know?
Mr. Chair, Manager Hennis, we haven't scheduled anything yet, but it's definitely on our radar to do for like October-ish.
All right, thank you. I was just wondering if it's still in the works. All right, thank you.
I think we're all done. We're looking for a motion to adjourn.
I make move to adjourn.
Manager Breitbach.
Second.
Manager Howley moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. 5-0. Thank you.